MVP, the producer.
Today I want to talk about the Oxfam Wealth Gap Report. It is a study every year that's done by this organization, and what they do is basically look at the facts and numbers about the economy and the massive wealth gap between the top 1% and the rest of the world. So I'll just start off by reading from their summary to give you an idea of what the findings were. So last year saw the biggest increase in billionaires in history, one more every 2 days. Billionaires saw their wealth increase by $762 billion in just 12 months. This huge increase could have ended global extreme poverty 7 times over. 7 times over. 82% of all wealth created in the last year went to the top 1%. That's insane. While the bottom 50% saw no increase at all. Dangerous, poorly paid work for the many is supporting extreme wealth for the few. Women are in the worst work. And almost all the super rich men, governments must create a more equal society by prioritizing ordinary workers and small-scale food producers instead of the rich and powerful. So, there's a lot to get into in this, so bear with me as I get angry. It's going to be a roller coaster of emotions. So, let's see. So, the view from the top. So, last year saw the biggest increase in the number of billionaires in history. One more every 2 days. Now there are 2,043 dollar billionaires worldwide. 9 out of 10 are men. That's not really surprising because our economy is not, female centric. It's a lot of bosses are male, and most CEOs are male. Not saying anything to, disparage women in any way, but unfortunately that's just how our economy is. Now, in 12 months, the wealth of this elite group, the top 1%, grew by $762 billion. That's enough to end extreme poverty 7 times over. 7 times over. So, their wealth increase, the top 1% could have solved poverty around the world. Isn't that amazing? I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a capitalist, but I'm a mixed market theory kind of guy. I don't believe that unfettered capitalism or, unfettered communism would ever work because you need a balance in between them. So MMT, mixed market theory, Keynesian economics, these are all the logical ways you would run a government. You look at Norway, they're capitalists, they're not socialist. They have good social programs, but they're not a socialist country. People like to point to Venezuela as a socialist country. It is a socialist country, but the reason they're in such shit when it comes to their economics, right now at least, is because Maduro was sending oil to Cuba for free, basically. He was just giving away all their oil, and they're the most rich petrol state in the world. So that's not really a fair way to compare Venezuela to a socialist country, because social programs is not the same as socialism. So let me go on. New data from Credit Suisse means 42 people now own the same wealth as the bottom 3.7 billion people. What the fuck? Are you trying to tell me 61 people worked harder than 3.7 billion people? They worked that much harder to get that much money, and they deserve to have that? No. No fucking no. So, also, the 3 richest Americans own the same wealth as the bottom 50%. 3 people in America own more money than bottom 50% of all of us. Does that not make you mad like it makes me fucking mad? Whew. Moving on. There is strong evidence that current levels of extreme inequality far exceed what can be justified by talent, effort, and risk-taking. Instead, they are more often the product of inheritance, monopoly, or crony connections to government. They're talking about wealthy individuals. So, obviously, they're not working harder than your average day Joe. With just slightly more than 1 day of work, the average CEO in America makes more than their average employee in the entire year. Economic rewards are increasingly concentrated at the top, like CEO payments, while millions of ordinary workers remain on poverty wages. Returns for shareholders and senior executives gone through the fucking roof. Because there's a few things. When you're looking at an economy, you can't use the stock market as the only indicator of how well the economy is doing. You can't even use unemployment. Because, I mean, they're good indicators, but that's not reflecting on how the average American is doing. The average American doesn't own stocks. Guys, right now, you need to invest in the stock market. Don't put all your money in there because, of course, there's a possibility of a huge crash coming. I believe there's a huge crash coming, but now's a great time to put your money in there. And you can even do it ethically. You don't have to, invest in multi-billion-dollar corporations. You can find your favorite app maker, invest in them, or anything. I just recommend doing it. It's a very important financial skill to have. And when we let, because the majority of Americans don't invest, the only people who do are the super rich. So they're basically sitting on their ass all day, not making any product, not giving any services. They just watch their numbers go up, 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 up. And they get huge returns. They pay less in taxes than normal people like you and I, because for some reason, if you make all your money through investing, you actually only pay like a 15% rate on your, it's either 15 or 25%. I'm not exactly sure, but that's insane. Because if you're making millions of dollars a year, a 15% tax, that's lower than my rate? What the fuck? That makes no sense either. So, fortunes of the rich are often boosted by tax dodging, surprise, surprise, and individuals and the corporations of which they are owners or shareholders. So, about taxes. Guess how much taxes the top 1% around the world screwed out of their governments last year? That would be $7.6 trillion. Now in America, tax dodgers in just the top 1% got away with stashing $200 billion in revenue offshores or through loopholes, you name it. So they're basically robbing us. They're making us foot the bill for the taxes, the infrastructure, the military spending, the social programs. We're the ones paying for it, not these fuckers. And there's something wrong about that. Or is it just me? Now, like I said earlier, I'm a capitalist guy. I believe in capitalism, but not laissez-faire, Ayn Rand-styled, unfettered capitalism. You have to have restrictions, or our environment would go to shit. Let me read this next finding. So, assuming the level of inequality stays the same as it is now, you would have to increase economic output around the world 175-fold. And that would be at the detriment of the, then that's just to push everybody above $5 a day. And it would be catastrophic to our environment. Because right now, we're already screwing our environment up with the economic output we have now. And then, if you just look at this, you think 175 times more pollutants would help the world? Fuck no. Ugh. This is so infuriating, man. Alright, they get into like some child labor statistics, and also, because they don't only discuss the rich, they also discuss the poor and the kind of circumstances and things that they're living in day to day. So recent estimates by the International Labor Organization, or the ILO, show that almost 1 out of every 3 workers is in an emerging developing country, and they live in poverty. 43% of global youth labor force is still unemployed or working but living in poverty. More than 500 million young people are surviving on less than $2 a day. 500 million people, less than $2 a day, while 64 people own the same amount of wealth as the bottom 50% of the world. And people say taxation is theft. It's theft when these assholes can get away with it and steal from you and I, because part of living in a society is a social contract. A social contract means everybody plays by the same rules. You don't get special treatment just because you're a rich investment banker or a day trader. It's not how it works. So now they go on to what's causing all of this. I think I kind of already laid some of it out, but at the bottom, workers have seen rights eroded and trade unions undermined, reducing their bargaining power. Corporations are consolidating more and more and are under huge pressure to deliver ever greater returns to wealthy shareholders. These returns often come at the cost of workers and offer a major incentive to engage in industrial levels of tax dodging. Corporations use the mobility of their investments to force the race to the bottom between countries on tax and wages. The threat of greater automation also puts more power in the hands of wealthy owners and pressure on workers. That's a great point, because we know, I mean, just look at Elon Musk's new venture with his autonomous driving semi-trucks. They've already been bought by quite a few companies in the US. I think Sam's Club or Walmart bought a few. I can't remember the other companies, but it's like 4 or 5 companies in America have already ordered these. So every one of those trucks is putting somebody out of a job, and it's only a matter of time before that comes mainstream. 10, 15 years from now, I would guess half of the trucking industry is just dead. Because obviously, when you're working in a capitalist system, you're not putting workers first. You're always putting profits first, and that's just how capitalism is. You can't deny that as a fact, because it's true. It's just empirically true. All right, so in order to do this, to reduce wealth inequality, they recommend providing education, healthcare, and social protection for all, and pay for this by ensuring rich individuals and corporations pay their fair share of tax. Yeah, it's reasonable. Evidence from more than 150 countries, rich and poor alike, between 1970 and 2009, shows that investment in healthcare, education, and social protection reduces inequality. So there's no argument to be had that laissez-faire capitalism is going to lead to the best social outcomes, because we can see that's empirically false. We have a rapacious for-profit healthcare system where you can get denied care for cancer, you name it, any sort of medical condition because of a pre-existing condition? That's not fair. If you don't have the money to pay for your healthcare service, you die. There's actually a Democrat running right now whose daughter died because they didn't have access to health care. We're in the richest country in the world, and we can't even take care of our own people, but we can spend billions of dollars overseas funding Saudi Arabia's bomb fest in Yemen. We can fund all of these corrupt countries overseas, Israel. We're basically just bowing down to Netanyahu as our master, basically blowing him, doing whatever the fuck he wants, because the Zionists are leading us into even more turmoil in the Middle East. I know that's a bit of a tangent, but just makes me so frustrated. So I like to get this point across as well. So governments have another key role to play in further reducing inequality by using taxation and spending to redistribute wealth, because that's the only way you're getting it out of the top 1%'s hands. These guys don't reinvest money back into the economy. They reinvest it into their own portfolios to where they just collect, and then just cash out. These guys don't Like, we know from decades of research, trickle-down economics, supply-side economics, the Chicago School of Economics, trickle-down economics, Reaganomics, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same thing, and they've all been disproven. Wealth does not trickle down from the rich to the poor in any meaningful way. Out of all of the money that would be made through this tax bill, or saved through this tax bill, it's not going to the workers. For maybe like the first 10 years, then it's phased out. But guess who gets to keep their corporate rates? Well, corporations, obviously. Down from 35% to 21% or 22% without getting rid of any of the loopholes. Because our previous corporate tax rate was 35%. And 35% corporate tax rate is pretty high. But what people always like to conveniently leave out is that that was not our effective tax rate. Our effective tax rate, guess what that was? 22%. So, are you trying to tell me that our corporate tax rate now, that it is 22%, is going to stay at 22% as the effective rate? I doubt it. I wouldn't be surprised if these corporations are getting away with maybe 12 to 15% of a corporate tax. While you and I foot the bill for the rest of America, we're in a $1.5 trillion hole now. That money is not being planned on being pumped back into the government. The Republicans are basically trying to literally just destroy every federal organization, every federal agency, whatever they can, whatever pleases their donors the most. Democrats too. Nobody's safe from all of this. A lot of people do this. So, now they have some ideas on how to change things. On redistributing a fair society, they think public school and university should be free. We need a social protection safety net. Refrain from directing public funding to incentives and subsidies for healthcare and education provision by for-profit and private sector companies, and expand public sector delivery of essential services, because we know from plenty of experiences that private industry tends to be a little more loose with their, how should I say this? They basically don't care if they do a good job or not. They get the money, they get these government contracts. Look at Puerto Rico, Blackfish or Whitefish. It was Whitefish, I think. Whitefish, Montana. Out of there was a company called Whitefish Enterprises or something like that. They got the contract to go to Puerto Rico, and instead of rebuilding their infrastructure at the cheapest price possible, well, they ended up getting like $100 a day stipend for food. They got free hotel accommodations. They were living like kings and costing the taxpayers tons of money. An exorbitant amount of money. But that's how these kinds of things work when you have private interest and the government working together. So we need a new generation of tax reforms. We need to tax to reduce extreme wealth. And that means prioritizing taxes that are disproportionately paid by the very rich, such as wealth, property, and inheritance, and capital gains tax. Increase taxes and rates and collection on high income. Introduce a global wealth tax on billionaires to help finance the SDGs. So they didn't list this in the report, and this is not an idea I'm heart set on, but hear me out. What do you guys think about and this is going to piss a lot of people off, but income gap, or cap. So we all know minimum wage is. What about a maximum wage? Does anybody on this planet need $100 billion? If you had to think about that, you're stupid, because the answer is no. Now, if you're going to try to say, well, like Jeff Bezos, if he wasn't a billionaire, he wouldn't be able to build a company as big as Amazon and yada, yada, yada. Okay, I understand that. But most investments aren't going back into this company. Holy shit, I just lost my train of thought. Oh well, I guess I'll just forget that ever happened. Something about Jeff Bezos. And yeah, do you really think Jeff Bezos works harder? Like that much harder than all of these Americans? Because I know he's one of the 3 Americans. Is he American? I think he is. Who owns like a third of the wealth that half the population has. It's crazy. Nobody needs that much money. So I think if you implement a wealth cap or a maximum wage, we should be a lot better off. Or at a certain point, like say you make $100 million a year, everything after that is 100% taxed. You don't get to keep any of it. Because you're not working harder than everybody else. And when you have that money, you're not pumping it back into the economy. Because consumers are the ones who drive economies. It's not the supply side economics. That's absolutely wrong. It's about the people who have the purchasing power. So if you want a product, you know, it's not going to be investors that are buying it. They might invest in the company, but they're not going to invest if people aren't buying that product. Consumers have all the purchasing power. But when these investment bankers and these rich CEOs just stash their money and keep it to themselves, they don't pump it back into the economy. And that's a huge problem because that's what leads to these increasing levels of wealth inequality. And also, reduce pay ratios. So, why don't we just publish the company's pay ratio? That's what they recommend here. Between the CEO and the median pay. I think that's fair. I think that's actually a great idea. Let everybody know how much money the CEO is making compared to the average worker. Support collective bargaining. Unions. Hugely important. They've been under assault from the right wing since they've been a thing. But without unions, you know, this country, basically all of our labor laws were built by unions, by collective bargaining, by people saying, I don't want my fucking kid dying from black lung in this coal mine anymore. I don't want my daughter to get caught in another spool in this linen factory and get her scalp ripped off. So, collective bargaining is a good thing. It's what allows employees to negotiate wages a lot of times. And also, let's start putting some employees on the board of directors for these companies. Not just shareholders and CEOs, but people who actually contribute, you know, the ones who are kind of the whole reason you can have a business and profit. Employees are seriously underpaid. We know if we kept up with the cost of, or the rise of inflation and productivity from 1970, today the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, would be around $23. So when people try to bring up the point that, you know, if you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, you're gonna kill a lot of businesses. That's true. And the reason it's true is because they're not an effective business. If you cannot afford to pay your workers the productivity that they put into your company, you're obviously not a productive company. It's not that hard to figure out. Like, if I'm busting my ass and you're not, you know what, fuck it. That's all I had to say about that. So, in summation, what can we do? I just want to run over everything again. We reduce the pay ratios, support gender equality in the workplace, end extreme wealth, work together to achieve a revolution in inequality data, implement policies, recognize and protect the rights of citizens and their organization to freedom of speech and association, and start to incentivize business models that prioritize fairer returns, require all multinational corporations to conduct mandatory diligence on their full supply chains to ensure that all workers are paid a living wage in line with UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And finally, eliminate the gender pay gap. That's controversial because, you know, people will say, you know, women get paid 77 cents on the dollar for the same job that a man does. But that's not necessarily true. You just have to factor in a few things. Then there's still a gender gap, but I think it's like 93 cents on the dollar. So in fairness, I'm just putting that out there. So I'd really be interested to hear your opinions about this, because this can't happen anymore. We have to put an end to this. And if we don't, we're going to be living under the boot of billionaires and tyrants for the foreseeable future.